you know, some certain projects that were related to real estate, and it was affected by this because of like the market demand. And I believe that, you know, the private sector sat down and recalculated and replanned its resources. There are some issues where PPPs failed.
Yes.
It didn't address what is expected.
I agree.
And some of them didn't meet, you know, I would say, the expectations.
Correct.
Because some of the important factor in PPPs is, I would say, the well-being of the environment during the time of the tendering and the implementation. And we're like, you know, maybe like in India, we're the wedding planner, or the matchmaker. Yeah, we are the matchmaker.
Yes.
That's what the PPP unit is.
Hello, everyone, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all for this yet another episode of the Stakeholder Outreach Initiative by P3 World Council. At P3 World Council, we love to bring you insights, some deeper updates, and what is happening in different countries in the realm of PPPs. The country that we are exploring today is Kuwait in the Middle East. And we have with us engineer Nayef Al-Haddad, who would be speaking on behalf of the Kuwait Authority for Partnership Projects. Before we begin, let me first give you a short introduction of engineer Nayef. Engineer Nayef received his Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Southern Illinois University at Carbondale in 2001 and Masters in Business Administration from Gulf University for Science and Technology in 2016. He has more than 20 years of experience in the energy sector, working for Kuwait MEW, GCC Interconnection Authority, and KAPP. He is currently Manager of Research and Strategic Planning at KAPP, and he managed multiple PPP projects such as the Azur North Phase 2 IWPP, Al Khairan Phase 1 IWPP, Al Heman WWTP, as well as the GCC's first energy trading online platform. His professional focus is set towards enabling the private sector's involvement in infrastructure projects and energy policy making. Engineer Nayef, welcome for this episode of Stakeholder Outreach Initiative by P3 World Council.
Thank you, Mr. Hashal. It's a pleasure, and we'd like to thank you for the kind invitation to consider myself representing, as well as Kuwait Authority for Partnership Projects, KAPP, for hosting us to talk about like what's the scene of public-private partnerships here in Kuwait, and also to open up the window to share the awareness and as well as the available opportunities to participate in public-private partnerships through here in the state of Kuwait.
Indeed, it's a pleasure, Engineer Nayef, to have you at this discussion. Let's begin. My first question that I would want to ask you is, the global economy currently is going through a stressed phase, especially because of the high inflation rates caused due to the Russia-Ukraine war. We are seeing the central banks raising their interest rates. So all in all, it's a tough situation that the markets are going through. And when it comes to tough situations like these, capital projects, they get impacted immediately, and PPPs are one of them. So I want to ask you, has there been any impact of these developments on PPP projects in Kuwait?
Well, I would say that, like, you know, we're talking right now in the era of, I would say, post-COVID-19. And the world is a small community right now where, like, you know, multiple effects that happens on different aspects that affects the economies in many ways. If we talk about, like, you know, the swings of oil prices, if we talk about, like, the political effects of, like, you know, the war that's happening in Ukraine, we talk about, like, you know, the still effects of COVID-19 and what it had effect on, like, the economies, and even sometimes the increasing inflation that's happening in the commodities. it has, of course, unexpected effects on such kind of projects and plans for the state. It comes to a point where the state has to sit down and decide what is cheaper and what's the value for the money.
Okay.
And how to evaluate the current available financial resources of a state to determine which best practice would be the best to manage the state budget, as well as to maintain the development of its financial sector. And mainly we talk about like attraction of investment. Of course, COVID-19 is the biggest effect that had like globally on every state. And honestly, yes, we had some certain projects that were related to real estate, and it was affected by this because of like the market demand. And I believe that the private sector sat down and recalculated and replanned its resources, and it wouldn't make it. One of the projects was like a labor city. Okay. And the labor city was just a major conflict with the aspect of COVID-19 because of the quarantine, the self-isolation. It just killed the idea. That's one straight killer for like COVID-19. And unfortunately, some of the main interested bidders were like also coming from China, and which was affected mainly by this. So this has like a major effect on it. If we talk about like renewable like energy in general, yes, this Kuwait, as like other GCC countries, still depend on fossil fuel, and phasing out fossil fuel is not an easy process.
Yes,
because the states depend on it mainly because of its availability and the low cost of having it.
Correct.
In comparison, like if you're like an importing country in another continent, which is then you'd have to sit down and financially and economically calculate, should I import rather than depend on renewable energy?
Exactly.
So the conflict here, you have available resources of fuel, as well as you generate it at a low cost. Yet the world is shifting towards decarbonization and integration for renewable energy.
Yes.
And this is what comes here, like, I would say coming back to the drawing table and thinking about like what should be done and how to compete it and how to enable the private sector to compete against like what's available and easy and accessible of natural resources at the state.
Indeed. Yeah. Indeed. I mean, I agree with all that you have highlighted with regards to the macroeconomic challenges that almost every economy globally is going through. However, now when we look at PPPs in our conversations with different PPP units across the world, there are some specific challenges that each is facing. Like, for example, building the investor confidence in the projects and maybe like the capacity building challenges that many have. So are there any specific challenges which are very specific to or focused to PPPs that Kuwait faces and you would like to highlight for us?
Well, I would say, right now, currently, we are in the process. Okay, so we're like in a small, I would say, small area, like, which is the GCC area, and there is a fierce competition. The fierce competition about attraction of foreign investment. And there is a shift sometimes in polarity, sometimes, political affiliation and strategic relationships affect the kind of drive where like the market is going.
Yes.
The kind of politics that happens.
Yes.
It reflects on the economy. It reflects on, like, I would say, for example, the trade agreements and the sometimes political/economic cooperation. So you see that like where like the investors are going and where they're backing off.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that it's an ongoing process that doesn't stop.
Correct.
That's one of the things. That's why, like, you see a fierce market competition. You see other countries are opening up at a bullet speed.
Correct.
Where other countries are like actually observing and learning and seeing what others are doing and adapting to it.
Correct.
Here in Kuwait, what's unique about us is that we are like we're a democratic state where we have multiple layers of, I would say, decision making and politics. and we have a general state audit bureau, which monitors the performance of the state. We have a parliament, and we have multiple entities that fall into the decision making. So sometimes, yeah, it takes time for the process to move.
Correct.
But also to ensure that it goes according to what's in the planning and as has detailed and made by the law.
Exactly.
Some of the challenges, I would say that, although the Kuwait has started doing PPPs maybe a while ago, some other states has exceeded us in doing so since maybe early 90s.
Correct.
Some countries, maybe, for example, Oman, or
Correct.
like, UAE, and they have given them, I would say, much more experience through trial and error and testing and redoing these kind of, I would say, multiple pilot projects over time.
Indeed.
To experiment and see what's best fit.
Exactly.
See, this is what like right now is actually happening. Everybody expected that, and maybe had the assumption that we are already born like that. It doesn't. You gain the skill over time by learning. It's a learning. But sometimes the learning curve has a toll on, like, maybe I would say on the toll of, for example, the economy.
Yes.
Being like there is delays whatsoever. So this has to be understood. Correct. And that's why, like, for example, on yearly process and periodically, I conduct meetings with the private sector, like for local international banks,
correct,
companies, investors, embassies, foreign diplomatic teams coming into the state, as well as government partners.
Correct.
To tell them about like the PPP system and how it is, and what are like the way how the practice is.
Yes.
See, PPP are not like, for example, the wizard stick to solve everything. And maybe through the cases that you have shared, Mr. Harshal, through B3 World Council, there are some issues where PPPs failed.
Yes.
It didn't address what is expected.
I agree.
And some of them didn't meet I would say the expectations.
Correct.
Because some of the important factor in PPPs is, I would say, the well-being of the environment during the time of the tendering and implementation.
Yes.
Maybe the project is good, but during that time, maybe there is an economic crash or like something that happens.
That's true.
Many assumptions and many risks circulate around that could affect it, while the concept could be actually perfect.
Yes. That's true. That's true. Picking up on what you just mentioned in your one of your point, Engineer Nayef, that the regional politics, I can say, especially about the GCC, is indeed an internal major challenge, I can say. But then what I feel is, when I look at it from an outsider, someone who is not based out of the GCC, but I see that the GCC is one of the most promising markets going forward. When it comes to PPPs and capital projects. So yeah, I mean, it is into a fierce competition. However, what I say is the needed impetus that the world economy will need will definitely come from the GCC. That's what I feel. Now, my moving on to my next one, picking up from where we just discussed about that, when I studied about KAPP, which was earlier the Partnership Technical Bureau, and when I was studying about how it formed and how it has evolved over time, my latest, whatever I've researched latest, I've seen that you have managed to attract close to more than 20 billion plus projects on PPPs in Kuwait. So definitely you must be doing something that investors are more interested, or they're attracted towards this particular PPP ecosystem. So can you share with us for a global audience and for PPP units across who are wanting to understand that what exactly has the government done, some basic top three recommendations, or you can say, that has enabled you to reach where you are today?
Okay. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to potential. I would say that right now the state of Kuwait is seriously taking the involvement and the engagement of the private sector in participating and financing and funding and designing and implementation of state strategic and promising projects through the private sector engagement.
Okay.
And that's the state approach right now. It's a very serious approach. And we're working with all the parties to ensure that they would participate. We would like to see, I would say, fair competition. We'd like to see a pool of competitors coming from all around the globe. We offer a lot of facilitation. We don't require local partnership. I'm talking about like local partnership with other local partners. They could come as theirs, They don't have to be like, because in some restrictions, maybe through EBC models here we have to they have to have a local partner. No, we don't do that.
Yes.
They are coming of their own free will. The state has, I would say, a very clear legal system regarding PPPs, regarding arbitration, regarding, and these documents has already been reviewed, done in the best practice, and meeting the state requirements, which is to ensure fairness, to ensure, I would say, all the legal requirements and the obligations of both parties. And this is also done through the feasibility studies. For each project, we can do a feasibility study to study the risk matrix and the obligations, to determine the value of money, and how to attract and what to incentivize the private sector to be engaged.
Correct.
And to come into Kuwait. The second thing is actually, we have a published PPP law, which has been published since 2014. We have a guidebook that has been done in cooperation with the World Bank. And I believe that, our practice, if somebody goes through the procedures, it's following the international practice in how to tender a PPP.
Correct.
Without any bypassing stages.
Yes.
The thing is about it is that, what they need is, I would say, to spend some time studying the local scene here in Kuwait, to understand the legal system, the state procedures, and when they invest time and effort in doing so, they'll find that there is a lot of opportunities, a lot of room, a huge gap of room. So through this, and believe me, our doors are open at KAPP. We receive all the kind of proposals and ideas. We have a very active, I would say, process and even kind of mentality set towards sharing the awareness.
Correct.
And if anybody and by the way, aside from that, we conduct also periodic meetings with other PPP units on a global scale.
Yeah.
To exchange knowledge, to share it, and to learn from the mistakes and see how it could be done.
Exactly.
And this is good, because in the end, these entities, as us, as PPP units, we are the mediator between the private and the public sector.
Absolutely. Yes.
And we're like, maybe like in India, we're the wedding planner. Or the matchmaker. Yeah, we are the matchmaker.
Yes.
That's what the PPP unit is.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to facilitate to enable them to be sitting on the same table.
That's true. I'll definitely agree with your point, Engineer Nayef, when you said that a strong arbitrary or a regulatory framework, that is one of the foundations, I've seen in many other PP units as well, that this is one of the needed things that is required for the success of PPPs. In regards to PPP projects, when I was researching about KAPP, I got to see that there are many projects you are doing with regards to wastewater, water, and other different sectors which are there. So can you highlight some of the key projects that you currently are doing for the global investors at KAPP?
I'm going to go through that, but I just missed one point just to mention and highlight, just to my previous comment. And this is very crucial. I'd like also to B3 World Council to focus on it, and also for everybody who's watching this.
Sure.
Dialogue is the most important thing.
Correct.
Dialogue.
Yes.
Dialogue between the public and the private sector. Keep it periodic, open up, talk about it, discuss what's the issues in order to move forward.
Correct.
That's the most crucial thing, If there is a channel for dialogue, when both parties sit on the same table and exchange ideas and see how it is, is how you could perfect a PPP project.
I understand.
Now for the I would say the upcoming pipeline right now, currently in the tendering process and in the qualification process, we have two big power plants okay, which are depending on fossil fuel. We talk about like Azure, IWP phase 2 and 3, and Al Kiran, and both are cogeneration. And believe me, although I know some people will be thinking about like fossil fuel, and right now the world is going through decarbonization. We are considering as well, like when the stage for the request proposals to start to include elements of decarbonization and integration of renewable energy into this project to ensure that this project is going through with the same trend that's happening globally about the integration and reduction of emissions.
Correct.
That's number one. Another project right now currently, which is in the feasibility study stage, is Al Shigaya Renewable Complex project. Now, this project is multiple phases. One phase has already been completed. It was done through EBC, through the Ministry of Electricity and Water and Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research. Now, KAPP has the second and the third phase, which is a huge plot.
Okay.
And upon examination, and I'm not talking about like a certain renewable energy technology. I'm talking it could be any. We talk about like if any certain technology, this plot of land could accommodate a minimum of 3 gigawatts.
Correct.
And maybe could go up to 4 gigawatts. And that's a huge project.
Yes.
Right now, there's a dedicated team that's from KAPP, the buyer, the Ministry of Electricity and Water. We have also the people who made the original ideas, the Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research called KISR. They're working together right now with an assigned transaction advisor, conducting the feasibility study. Hopefully for next year, we'll start the qualification process.
Okay.
That's right now currently in the stages. Now, on another project, we have a copy-paste project from Al Hayman wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
This one is called North KAPP. This project will be double in the size. Al Hayman was like 500,000 cubic meters. We talk about like a million cubic meters.
Correct.
We talk about like 2 different PPP systems, just like Al Hayman. We talk about like a BOT and a DBO system.
Correct.
Huge coverage of land and network. It's a very huge project, very complicated. But if Al Hayman has been done and it's still in the process of the construction, and we made it with our partners, this could be done as well. That's why we have the confidence.
Amazing.
Another project is, and that's for the next year as well.
Okay.
Another project we have is currently Kuwait. Unfortunately, we have a low communications infrastructure. We talk about like landline communication infrastructure, which include the fiber optics as well.
Correct.
And right now we're in the works. We have a transaction advisor with the Ministry of Communication, which is the public entity. We're working on them right now to examine and study the feasibility of tendering this project, that rehabilitation of the existing assets, operating it, maintaining it as a PPP project.
Amazing. That's anything in the education sector?
The education sector, actually, personally, on a personal level, Mr. Harshal, I'm a person who's, I would say, passionately sponsoring and advocating for social infrastructure projects.
Correct.
And that's the most crucial. That's the most crucial, because that's where, like, the public will notice the real value for money.
Yes.
The real difference
Yes.
in saving, in performance,
Yes.
and capacity, and I would say in the excellence and the execution. The public wouldn't notice a power station. They wouldn't want to notice a waste treatment plant, but they will notice, I would say, the effect of proper education,
Correct.
schools, hospitals,
Yes.
social care.
Yes.
And this is one of the things that we still in discussion and dialogue with our partners, the public entity, to go through. We had a previous project about this. It was for like multiple schools, I believe 9 schools whatsoever. But unfortunately, at that time, the market was not comprehending. It was still, it was in 2015. The market was not comprehending how, or I would say maybe measuring what is the actual cost the state is spending on education facilities in order to provide the best competitive bids.
Correct.
Hopefully right now, over time, especially right now with post-COVID-19, a lot of integration of technology occurred. We talk about like, utilization of virtual meetings and virtual teaching that's happened.
Yes.
Hopefully this will be considered and hopefully that, you know, with our partners, the Ministry of Education, we would have an upcoming project that will involve education and involve the integration and a new mindset, and I would say a new fresh look at how education should be done through the facility for the students.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, Engineer Nayef. I mean, it was quite an insightful conversation with you, where we got to know about how Kuwait is working towards achieving its national vision goals for your country. It was a pleasure talking to you, and we really appreciate the time that you took out to discuss. And P3 World Council would be more keen to associate with the KAPP in Kuwait going forward, you know, to take this mandate of PPPs to the next level. That's what I feel.
Mr. Hasha, first of all, I'd like to thank you and again for this opportunity to give us, myself and KAPP, this opportunity to I would say explore Kuwait, to present Kuwait, to talk about the public-private systems here that's happening in Kuwait. I would like to applaud P3 World Council and yourself for your activities in promoting and advocating for public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
I believe this region here, we need more support. We need more understanding and more awareness.
Correct.
With the public perception and support, as well as, you know, like us, the experts in this field, that we could make it, I would say, more acceptable, more appreciated, and more hospitable to be achieved.
That's true, and we are always there to support any of such initiatives. More than happy for that, Engineer Nayef.
That's much appreciated. Thank you.